So you're an interesting person to ask because you're both a Satomura voter and a Shima voter. I see a lot of people comparing the two, and if you're gonna bunch these Japan candidates together, you've got the modern New Japan guys, you've got your older wrestlers like Fujiwara, that kind of belong in their own little bucket, and then I see people pairing off Satomura and Shima. Do you look at them as similar candidates?
I get the argument there because those two as a pair in concert are a referendum on like what can get into the Japanese category of Hall of Fame as an active pro wrestler today. Right. Like that is the thing. It's like Shima represents being a male wrestler outside of New Japan or wrestling most of his career in what's perceived as an indie. And then you have Satomura who as I discussed, like you have the fact that it was like Joshi was at the worst spot it's ever been in its career was during parts of her career and emerging from that as well. I get why people do that. I do find it that it kind of demeans both of their cases in a way because I feel like that in a lot of ways their cases are very different. Like Shima, you're talking about someone who had at least 20 years as a top draw in one of the biggest promotions and a promotion that went from indie to number two promotion in Japan, not by attrition, but by merit for 20 years. And then, like, the thing with Shima is always like, I'm probably the person that he will always be a yes vote for me and always be a firm yes, but he's doing more and more things that I understand the argument not to vote for Shima. Like, everything past 2018, if things worked out a different way, he would have gone. He would have vanquished a lot of doubts with OWE, but that did not happen. And that was the thing. I think that I can only speak for myself, Case, but I feel like you might be on the same page that OWE would have been the thing that would have been the trump card for him.
Oh, OWE and an AEW relationship absolutely would have put him over the top. But I hate the argument that he's tarnishing his legacy somehow, or, because he's working where he's working, that he's not a Hall of Famer anymore. The thing that I once told Larry Dallas, which hurt his feelings, and I used this to hurt him because he was publicly talking nonsense about Shima, was that we don't judge Patrick Ewing's career based on his time with the Seattle Supersonics. When Ewing left the Knicks, he was an obvious Hall of Famer. And when Shima left Dragongate, he was an obvious Hall of Famer. Nothing that he's doing now is hurting his candidacy. I would like people to look at the tape and look at the numbers in 2018 and 2019 when he was regularly popping houses to every promotion that he showed up to, including some dormant, lifeless promotions like Wrestle One. He is still, to this day, alongside with T-Hawk and El Lindemann, the only thing that ever drew in Wrestle One. I don't like the comparison of him and Satomura because while I do respect what she's done for the Joshi scene as a whole, I look at her as somebody who was able to keep the scene treading water and to keep them from drowning and vanishing to exist, and rather ceasing to exist. Whereas Shima is somebody that took a company that, has drawn well since the very beginning. And I often think that gets overlooked that Tori Monson's show number one was a successful entity at the box office. And like you said, took this promotion to becoming the number two in Japan on merit. They earned that. They have the numbers, they have the consistency, they have the reach all over the country. They have a reach all over the country that no promotion other than New Japan does. And because they focus, and this is part of Shima's, influence, because they focus on such small villages and small towns, that they have that. And that's why we see such a thriving dojo class, is because to some people, the only wrestling they ever saw was Dragongate, because Dragongate came to their town. And Shima, for so long, was the face of that entire operation. And I had an interesting discussion with Chris Samsa and with John Carroll in the Voices of Wrestling Slack today. I think one of the things about Shima that often gets overlooked, and I want you to speak to this a little bit, because I don't know if you'll agree or disagree, but what makes him so special, whereas I think Satomura was on an island, not that there weren't talented Joshi wrestlers in the early 21st century, but Shima came in and he had Suwa and he had Magnum Tokyo. And say what you will about Magnum, but he was, a once in a generation charisma machine, even if his in-ring didn't always match up. And Suwa was an in-ring machine whose charisma didn't always match up. But then later on, he had Milano Collection AT, in Yoshino, in Yamato, in Shingo, and Tozawa. And on a roster with all of those guys, at the end of the day, it was still Shima's promotion, really through about 2013. But it's not like he was a hindrance to Dragongate from 2014 through 2017. This is somebody who was surrounded by greatness and was greater than all of them for most of his career. And I think that is something that often gets overlooked with him.
Yeah, and I think that like when you talk about like the greatness here, like people also have to recognize the fact that it was not just like greatness that was developed. It was prodigious greatness. It was doing things in dead promotions like Michinoku Pro at that time, giving life when Michinoku Pro dearly needed it after Kai and Tai Deluxe left.
It very easily could have gone under.
Right. Yeah. So like, and Shima at that time in '98, he would have only been 20.
In Shima 98, if you've never seen him, is in part of my language, he is a fucking animal.
Yeah.
My two favorite periods of Shima's career. This is such an odd thing. My two favorite periods of his career are 1998 and 1999 Michinoku Pro and 2018 after he left Dragongate. For as great as he was in Toriyama and Dragongate, my two like go-to desert island Shima years are 98-99 and 2018. And I don't know what
two sides of the same coin.
Yes, it's just it like well, I think that's why I like the Wrestle One run so much, is that he came in and his first match was against Jun Tancho, and it's this 3-minute squash match where Shima just kills this kid, and it's the grown-up version of the angsty teen that showed up in Michinoku Pro. Like, I love him as an outsider. I liked his run in New Japan this year so much because it was kind of like he didn't belong there, and I think Shima reveled in that to some degree. That is really the story of Dragongate, is this promotion that just doesn't belong, and they continue to be successful, and I'm sure it really annoys some people. They continue to have their success discredited because they are an entity unto themselves, and for a long time it felt like Shima himself was that way. I just, I said this on the podcast that I did with Dylan over at Eastern Lariat. I think Shima's the single strongest candidate on the ballot. It drives me insane that he's not already in. No person nor tag team is as strong in ring, has as strong of a drawing record, and has the influence that Shima has. He has all three categories, and I think he excels at all three of them in a way that no other candidate does. He's not going to get in this year. He's not going to get in next year. It drives me absolutely insane.